Hi guys, today I'm going to be talking about parental controls on pfSense. Now, there really isn't anything in pfSense that is explicitly labeled as parental controls. However, there are features that you can use with pfSense that will give you some control over the network in the way that parental controls on other devices will use. And I'm going to be talking about three of these today, specifically around schedules, which is how you can schedule time when a specific network or group of devices can connect to your network. Another one is going to be around content filtering, and I'm going to be talking about how you can integrate pfSense with third-party offerings such as OpenDNS. And then I'm going to talk about the captive portal and how you can use this to control access as well. So I'm going to approach it in that order. So let's just dive in and start talking about schedules and how these can be an effective tool for providing parental controls on pfSense. So for this to work, you really need to have two separate networks for the devices that you want to use for parental control, then a network that you want to use kind of for everything else. And that's kind of the assumption I'm going to be working with. So in this case, we're going to have the internet connection coming into pfSense. That's the wide area network or the ISP side. And then I'm going to have a network that I don't want to filter, which is going to contain devices that won't be filtered or parental controlled in any way. And then I'm going to have a network that has the devices that I do want parental controls on. Now, this setup is fairly straightforward in this situation. Now, a network is probably going to be typically more complex than that. Mine is, at least, because I will typically have another network over here for IoT devices. And then I have a network for like guest network and what have you that I use for people when they come over that we have visitors often. So I put up a guest network for them to connect to. But the ones I'm mostly interested in as these set of devices down here, this is where my kids are, and this is where all their devices connect, and this is my main network where my work computers are, and maybe my phone and so on. Now, there's a lot of ways you can accomplish this for network segmentation. The two main ways are using VLANs, which allows you to use the same physical hardware, but you use virtual LANs to kind of segment that out. And the other way is to actually use separate physical hardware for these networks. And in this case, you would have two physical ports on pfSense, and you would then plug in an access point or a switch into one port, and then you would plug in an access point or a switch into another port, and there's separate physical hardware running each of these network segments, but they show up as different interfaces inside of pfSense. I have a whole video on how to do all this, so if you're interested in doing that, I'll link that in the video description down below, so you can set up pfSense using VLANs, and then also some strategies for how to segment your network. But I'm going to assume it's going to be something like we have here, where you have network segmentation already in place, and I'm going to show you how to set it up for that kind of network setup. So this setup is really pretty straightforward. I am using a lab environment here to kind of simplify things, because my network, I don't want to change a bunch of stuff while I was doing this video recording. I installed pfSense right here as a virtual machine on Hyper-V, and behind that I have a Windows 11 client that I'm going to be using as the client on both sides. I can easily toggle between the networks. So this one's got pretty straightforward settings. If I go over here to the network, I have an external adapter, and then I have two internal adapters. One is going to be the filtered side, one's going to be the unfiltered side. And with Windows 11, I have this just with a single adapter, and it's on the internal side right now, but I can easily switch it to the internal side, the internal 2 side, which will allow me to switch it to between the filtered and unfiltered side of the network. So this is pretty straightforward once you have it all set up. And if I open up pfSense on Windows 11, you're going to see a panel that looks like this, which is, of course, pfSense. So just an overview of the network, I have a WAN adapter, a LAN adapter, which I'm going to be using for the filtered side, and then I'm going to use optional 1 as my unfiltered side. So those are my network segments that I'm using, and the ones that I'm most interested in, of course, are going to be these two, which I'm going to be using as part of my DHCP configuration. Now, you don't have to use DHCP configuration, just makes your life a lot easier for managing IP addresses. So I have LAN 1 and option 1 as my DHCP services that I'm going to be running. LAN 1 is going to be on 192.168.1.0/24, and it's going to be giving out IPs between 10 and 245 on that IP subnet. And this one is my option 1 network, and it's 192.168.2.0/24, and it's going to give out IPs between 100 and 254. So both of them are configured for DHCP. And they are going to use some different settings that we're going to look at in a minute. But for now, let's just look at the schedules. Schedules are something that are built into pfSense. You don't have to add any additional software or add any other additional settings that are just built into the firewall. So if you come over to firewall and you click on schedules, I've already got one defined, but just to show you what this looks like, it's pretty straightforward. Oh, it's already in use. So I'm going to click add right here just to show what it looks like. You can define it based on the time that you want the network on. So I'm going to say lights on hours 1 or something like that, but I already have one that's called lights on, and said accessible between, if I could spell accessible, that might be good. Accessible between 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. And so to choose the times, it's pretty straightforward. Just choose the day of the week by clicking the top of the calendar here. It's not just for December, it's for all time. You can choose whatever month you want to use, but it will be, if you click that, it will be for that day of the week. And the time that you want it on, so 6 a.m., which is, and this is using military time, so 2000 hours, I guess, would be 8 o'clock. So between 6 a.m. and 8 p.m., I want this on, and so you can just say between 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. for the time, and then you add the time and you save it, and now you have that schedule defined. And this is the description. It gives you all the information and so on. So I'm going to delete this one right here because I don't need it anymore. But once you have the schedule defined, now you have to assign that to a rule. And the way you do that is on rules, and you do it on the network that you want to filter. So on this one, I already have it defined, but I'm going to nuke it and just re-add it because it's actually really easy to do. And we're going to delete this rule, and I'm going to add a new rule in. It's really easy to do. We're going to pass right here, and then we're going to choose the interface. It should default to that since I'm working on LAN, IPv4, and so on. And we're going to come down here to advanced options and scroll down to schedule, which is right here. And we're going to choose that schedule. And then we're just going to hit save. So as long as it's between 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. and I should be able to this should be able to access anything on my network. So I'm going to put that to the top of the stack, apply changes. And now I should be able to go to any site because it's between the hours of 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. So otherwise it's going to block it. So you're getting content because the rule is here. So pretty straightforward as far as setting up schedules. So the next thing I want to talk about is how to set up content filters. And this is a little bit more advanced. So I'm going to talk about two different options here, and I'm going to mention a third one, but I'm going to talk about the two different options that you can use here for content filtering. And so we're going to be looking at those next. So I'm going to be showing you a couple of different ways how to do content filtering. In this video, I'm going to be talking about two primary ways using OpenDNS. I covered a third way using Cloudflare, which is much more involved setup. So I'm just going to link that video in the video description down below. But OpenDNS has a couple of options that you can use. One is a fairly basic option, which gives you plenty of protection if you just want to take the defaults. And the other one is a more fine-tuned option that allows you to fine-tune the actual content that you want to filter and so on. So the basic option is using OpenDNS Family Shield, which itself is pretty easy to use. Basically, all you're going to do is configure some IP addresses for the DNS lookup on your network. So with this, you really just need to add the IP addresses for this and put them into your firewall. And this works for any device, not just pfSense. So the IP addresses already have them here conveniently to copy and paste into pfSense. Now, there's two ways you could do this in pfSense. One is to apply it to everything. So if you want to apply OpenDNS Family Shield to everything on your network, you could apply kind of a universal policy that will basically use this for everything for DNS lookup, and it provides malware protection and a number of other things. But if you don't want that, there's a way to do that as well. But I'm gonna look at both of these. So if you go to configurations and you go down here to general setup, and then under general setup, if you put in the DNS servers here for the lookup, you can apply the OpenDNS forwarders for the everything on here. So you could plug these IP addresses in right here, and that will apply OpenDNS Family Shield to all segments of your network. If you don't want to do that, you can apply it for each network segment, and then it will it'll just use it for a specific network segment rather than trying to apply it for all of your networks. And the way you do that is using DHCP. So on your DHCP server, under the DNS settings, I currently have it set to 192.168.1.1 for the filtered side. I'm going to put in these IP addresses for this option here. And then I'm going to put these and just simply apply them here and save it and then apply it. And that's just going to now issue those IP addresses as the DNS servers for anything that's on this network segment. So to test that, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to basically swap out this one to use, I'm going to switch the network to use the other internal side, apply it, and it's going to be on the unfiltered side. Now I'm going to switch it back to the filtered side, so it should be able to grab those new IP addresses because I got a new DHCP lease. And let's see if that holds true. So it looks like, let's go and check my network settings here. So if I go to Control Panel and I go down to Network and Sharing Center and then look at adapter settings and click on status here, I should be able to get details and see that I had my DNS servers for those two IP addresses that I put in. And I should be able to test that using, there's a website that you can use to test the example, adult site, example, adult site, site.com right here. And it's blocking it because Family Shield is blocking that particular traffic. Now that's the basic setup. Now there's a more advanced way to do this, and I'm going to walk you through that now. So if you want a more fine-grained control over everything that you want to be filtering on your network, you can use another service from OpenDNS, which is their Home Internet Security Shield, or OpenDNS Home, which is another free service. And you can sign up for this. The sign up is free, so you don't have to pay for this, but it's pretty easy to use too. So you just go into the sign up and you can sign up for your username and password. If you've already signed up, then you just go to login.opendns.com and then you can log in with whatever you put in for your login information. And it should take you over to this page right here for OpenDNS. And this is where you configure your network. So I'm going to start from scratch here. I'm going to actually delete this network so that you can see kind of a from scratch example here. So if you come back over here to your home, you don't have anything added. You'll get a page that looks like this, and it's a personal network. So we're going to add a network here, and it's going to detect your external IP address. So in my case, it is this one right here, and I'm just going to click add this network, and I'm going to give it a family name, so a friendly name, not a family name. I'm going to call it my network. This will become important in a minute, so just remember what that is. And I'm going to click done. And now that network is added to OpenDNS. Now, if I want to configure this particular network, I can drill down into it and I can choose what categories I want to filter, either by taking some defaults like high, moderate, or low. And the high, moderate, or low just depends on what they want. And you can customize these, you can view these. Or you can do a custom policy right here where you can choose all of the options here. So if I clicked on high and then clicked on customize, it's going to choose a lot of options for me. And I can add or remove those as I want. So these are just the options right here. I'm going to click apply for that, and that's going to apply those settings for me. Now, under security right here, this is where you can choose what you want to filter as far as protection goes. The malware and bot protection is probably something that you want to turn on anyway, and phishing protection, just have those on by default. This one, you don't have to turn this on. It's probably, pfSense already blocks this anyway, but this will block it as well. So you can apply it and it'll just add some additional protection. So very straightforward for security there. And there's other customizations that you can do for the little logo and so on, but you don't have to turn all that on. The main thing is just setting up the content filtering and so on for that. Now, the IPs for this one are these IPs down here. It's going to give you these IP addresses, and they're different from Family Shield. So we're going to put these into pfSense now for the network. So this is for the advanced option. And so we're going to use these IPs for this more advanced family setup, family security setup, and then these are for the family shield, the one that you don't have to log into. So with that, now that I have everything configured here, I'm going to come over here to pfSense, and I'm just basically just going to change my DHCP server settings right here. And I'm, instead of using Family Shield, I'm going to use these options right here. Now, the DNS settings for this are pretty straightforward. So that basically identifies all the traffic coming from this IP address to these IPs right here. And if I save this and apply it, now the new leases from DHCP should have those options applied. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to come back over here to my Windows 11 box here. I'm just going to toggle this network right here to go to internal 2, apply it, and then I'm going to switch it back over to internal 1 to grab those IP addresses and click OK. And I should be on that network now with those settings. So let me pull this Windows 11 box up right here. And if I go back to my Ethernet settings right here, let's close that out and then try the status again and get the details. Those look like the right settings right there. So that should be the IP addresses for the family security suite. So let's open up an example site. So I'm going to use that example adult site, and this right here is ensuring that it's not cached. I'm just using a non-cached site right here. It's saying that the certificate is invalid. That's because this is being blocked by OpenDNS. So it won't let me really continue to this site, but it's just not allowing me to go to it. But it's blocking it because OpenDNS is filtering this site right now. It's just an example site. There's nothing malicious about it. It's just a test site that you can use for testing OpenDNS. So there's one last thing that we need to do with pfSense, and that is to set up dynamic DNS for OpenDNS. And dynamic DNS just allows you to update the IP address for OpenDNS should it change on your pfSense instance. So we're going to do that by just coming over here to dynamic DNS under services and then clicking add right here. And it's pretty straightforward. Scroll down to OpenDNS and choose that. And then you can choose the interface to monitor, which should be your wide area network. And then you can choose the username, which would be the username for OpenDNS, and then password. And then for the host name, put in the network name that you gave it on OpenDNS. And so it's pretty straightforward. And then once you have that, click save. And if you want to force it to update, you can always click on edit and then click save and force an update to force it to update it. But now that is configured for OpenDNS. So OpenDNS is a great option for if you want the basic configuration that you never have to really worry about. You just open DNS Family Shield. You don't have to sign up for it. You just put the IP addresses into pfSense and you're good to go. And if you want to have that content filtering for parental controls, you can sign up for OpenDNS Family Security and then select the categories that you want and then configure the DNS settings just like we did a second ago. And then you sign up for dynamic DNS clients here. And then you have the content filtering turned on for that network segment. So there's another way to do this with Cloudflare, and it's a little bit more advanced. And I have a whole nother video covering that topic. If you're interested in that particular method, I'll link that in the video description down below. It's a lot more involved, but it gives you a lot more control as well. So if you want even more control than what OpenDNS gives you, Cloudflare might be a good option with their Zero Trust product. So now we're going to talk about the final way to secure your network, and that is using Captive Portal. And Captive Portal adds a lot more complexity to things. So this is going to be a little bit more of an advanced use case, but it'll force you to log in to use the internet. So if you want to prevent all internet access until you log into the device, you can put things like time limits and other things on it as well. That's a great option. So let's go through that process now. So for the ultimate control, if you want that, would be to use a Captive Portal, which requires you to do a login before you access the internet. So to make this work, though, on different networks, that is the network segments that we have, we need a way to manage the DNS if you want to use the filtering options that we've talked about. So to set this up with the filtering options, we need an actual DNS server. So the built-in DNS options that come out of the box with pfSense our DNS forwarder and DNS resolver. Neither one of these will work for what we're trying to do. The one that comes installed and enabled on pfSense out of the box is called Enable DNS Resolver is this one. So you want to disable this one. I already disabled it. Then you come down here and you hit save, and then you apply the changes, and then that will disable the DNS resolver. Now we're going to fill in the gaps with that using another option here, which is under package management, and it's called Bind DNS. I've already installed it, but I'm going to just show you that you can install it by typing in bind. If you type in bind here, search for it, you'll get a list of a package. You can install it. And then after it's installed, you'll get a new option on your services menu called Bind DNS Server. Now, Bind DNS Server is a full-blown DNS server, unlike DNS Forwarder or DNS Resolver, which just basically handles the DNS queries and either keeps a cache that's local or forwards them onto an upstream DNS server. Bind DNS can do that, but it also has the ability to actually host a DNS server on your pfSense box. So we're going to be using this option for our DNS. So the reason why is because this one allows us to have some more advanced configurations. So whenever we set this on, we're going to enable it, and then we're going to choose the optional, the interfaces we're going to listen on. In this case, we're going to use LAN and Opt1, basically everything but the WAN side. And then we're going to come down here and just go to the bottom, but we're going to make sure that enable DNS forwarding is off on this option, because we're going to enable this in a different way using global settings. So this is the configuration that I have, and I'm going to walk you through what this actually does here. Let me get a better view of this. So I'm not going to save that. I'm going to increase the size of this to show you what this is doing. And I'll have this in the video description down below, but this is how you configure a per interface DNS forwarder, which you will need so that you can have a different forwarder for filtered traffic and unfiltered traffic if you want to do this. If you don't want to do this, you can just use DNS Resolver and it'll work just fine. And so this allows me to have a different forwarder for my filtered traffic, which in this case is looking at OpenDNS. And then for my unfiltered traffic, it's just going out to Cloudflare quad with a 1.1.1.1. So this one will be filtered using OpenDNS, and this one will be unfiltered because it's not going to apply any of the OpenDNS filtering. So the way this is configured is matching this based on the subnet. So this is using the entire subnet for 192.168.1/24, and this is the entire subnet for the unfiltered side, that 2.0/24 network that we have. And so this is what we need to set in the advanced options. And you have to tweak this for your network to make it work for yours. But in any case, this is what you need. And once you have that configured, we're going to set that in the global settings for our pfSense configuration on Bind 9 DNS. And so it would look like this, and you can save that. And now that is going to set up all of the forwarders to some of those filtered and unfiltered clients. So this allows me to have both the filtering turned on as well as having the ability to use the captive portal. Now, the next thing that we need to do is change our DNS settings on our DHCP server to match the particular server that we're running now. So I would have to change it to 192.168.1.1 for my filtered side. And then for my unfiltered side, I'm going to set it to 192.168.2.1. So it's going to be listening on both of those IP addresses. And so whenever I grab an IP address from the DHCP server, it also gets the DNS server, and it'll know where to resolve that. And because the traffic is now coming from either the filtered side or the unfiltered side, it will know which DNS is upstream of those, and it will forward the traffic on to those, either for the filtered or unfiltered stuff. So once you have all of that set up, you can then go in and configure Captive Portal. So Captive Portal is a service that is baked into pfSense, and you can easily add a Captive Portal to your logins. So I already have one configured here, but it's easy to set this up. So I'm going to nuke it, and I'm going to click Add right here, and I'm just going to call this one Test 1. Just set it right there and hit Save. And I'm going to enable captive portal. Now, this is where you can set the interface that you want to listen on. So the filtered interface would be LAN 1. And there's a couple of things that you might want to set here. Idle time is if there's inactivity for more than maybe 15 minutes, you log them out. A hard timeout, this would be like a quota for how long you want any client to be logged on for. So if you only want to enable the session for 60 or for an hour, for instance, per log on before they have to log in again, you could set it to 60 minutes. I'd usually like 65 in case there's like just a 5 minute, a little bit of cushion on each end of that. In any case, setting those up allows you to have inactivity times and hard timeouts for those. The rest of this stuff is pretty, you can kind of look through it to see if you want to set any of this. It's like customizing the UI and then other things like that. But otherwise, you don't really have to do any of that. And there's terms and conditions. If you're doing this for a, like a coffee shop or an airport or something like that, that's where you'd put in that. But the authentication server is where we're going to set our authentication method. Now, the authentication server is, you just select it, and we're going to be using the local database for this. And we're going to say we can either do it one of two ways: allow users in group that have captive portal login privilege set, or if you just uncheck that, anybody that is in that local database that authenticates can log in. I'd recommend doing this though, because this will allow you to have separate users for logging into pfSense that aren't just captive portal users. So once you have all of those set, you can hit save, and you will get a zone set up like this. So this is listening on the LAN, and now I have my captive portal enabled. Now I need to add a user here, and you do that under user management under system. So we're going to come over here, and I've already added a user, but if you want to add a user or edit a user, notice it popped up the captive portal there because I enabled it. So we're going to come over here and add a user, and I'm gonna give it the username of April for my wife and give it a password. And you need to save the user first. So once you save the user, now you can come back over, click the pencil icon, and then edit the permissions. So you come down here to effective permissions and you click add, and then you can select from the menu here, user services log on with captive portal log on for that user, and you hit save. Now that user can log on to the captive portal. And so now that I have enabled that user, given them a password, and then I've set the permission to the captive portal, I can log on as that user now. And then I'm going to click log in, and it's probably going to redirect to MSN where we attempted to connect before. And so now we see that it is logged in using the captive portal. So that's how you use the captive portal, but it's now on the filtered side as well. So if I try to go to, let me get a incognito window here just so I can make sure that this is filtering still. So it is filtering using OpenDNS as well. So I have the schedules turned on, I have the OpenDNS turned on, and I also have the captive portal turned on. So now I have all three of those parental controls in play right here. So we've looked at a couple of those parental controls. We looked at the schedule. We then looked at how you can enable content filtering on your network. And then we looked at the captive portal. You don't have to use all of them at the same time. You can kind of pick and choose which ones you want to use. If you don't want to use schedules because you're using a captive portal, that would be effective. If you want to use captive portal, not use a captive portal, but use a schedule, that'd be fine too. But in all cases, you probably at least want to have some kind of content filtering turned on. So OpenDNS would be an option there. And so I've shown you how you can configure it to work just by itself without the captive portal, then how to use it with the captive portal by setting the DNS as part of bind 9. So all of those tools together will give you kind of a full scope of what you might call parental controls on pfSense. So it's certainly a good way to secure your network even if you're not using it for parental controls, but I certainly would advise you to use it for parental controls in that case. So I hope you like this video. If you do, like and subscribe, and also share it with your friends. And as always, thanks for watching.
If you like this content, please consider subscribing to the channel by clicking on the subscribe button. You can also like this content by clicking on the thumbs up or share this content with your friends, and also comment in the comment section down below. You can also find me online at www.blaze.net or on Twitter at @TheOneMule. And as always, thanks for watching.